The dense function created that fully connected layer to the output. The initial parameters used 50 LSTM cells. The activation function was ReLU, which is short for rectified linear unit, which maximizes between 0 and the x value, which really minimizes on the mean squared error. Optimizer, gradient-based optimizer, was Atom, and the loss that was optimized on was the mean squared error. And in this one, with a lot more data and more layers, we used 50 epochs or 50 training cycles. So here's a diagram of the initial LSTM model that was used to predict our historical stock price data for Sabre. The input parameters, we had length of 60 data points. Our batch size was 32 samples. We already talked about we had N neurons, LSTM cells, and then our activation function was ReLU. Here was our input sequence layer, and as you can see, as we input these into the LSTM cells, here we have our cost and then also our hidden layer, and these are processed and passed from cell to cell, but also our dropout layer, which included proportion 0.2, took the irrelevant information and dropped it from one layer of the LSTM to the next layer of the LSTM. And so we can see, similar to that one cell state model, how information is retained over here in our C state from one to the next as it's processed through the gates. And the gates, again, determine if information is forgotten or if information is retained. And so as information is retained, it stays with it as we input a new batch sequence all the way from x1 through xn. And as we finish our first layer, the dropout layer contains information that is non-relevant, and so we're going to drop it, and then we're going to pass the relevant information on to the second layer of the LSTM. And then the process repeats. So again, we have our long-term memory is stored and passed from one LSTM to the next cell, all the way from cell 1 through cell n, which was 50 cells per layer. And then we had a second dropout layer, which reduced by 0.2 irrelevant information. Finally, we have a final LSTM cell, and this is going to pass our feed forward to fully connect our model using the dense function, where we get a what we call a soft max, where we're minimizing that MSE or mean squared error based on the information and the adjusted weights through our first three layers. And then once we have that final activation, we process it and it comes out as one output layer. I called it Y sub n. So over the course of the 50 training cycles, or the 50 epochs, we can see the loss reduction in our cost function, and we can see that there's some peaks. So right around our 10th training cycle, we increase loss, but then we reduce it again. But obviously there's a steep drop off from our first training cycle to our second or third, and then around 40 it begins to level off. And at that point, we're pretty confident to go ahead and make our prediction with loss reduction. Here's a model summary for our LSTM model on the historical stock price prediction. It gives us our layers. So here's our first, our second, and our third, along with our dropout layer. It gives us our input shape. So how many LSTM cells we're using. What's our input length. Obviously, this array looks a little bit different than the RNN, and that's because we are storing it's going to look different because we're looking for long-term retention and short-term retention as we move through our layers and through our cell states. Total number of parameters affected, and then finally our feed forward network. So here's a visual of our tested data set. Remember, our test was 10%, so the first 90% is the actual data, and then we trained on, and then here is our 10% test. And in this model, we can see that there's a slight gap, And so one observation that could be made was once we actually compare this to the actual data in our test prediction, we may have overestimated the actual values, seeing how it jumped right here. The trend does look to continue some of these sharp changes that we observe in Sabre stock over the last 5 years. So now that we add in our actual values that occurred during that testing period, we can see that our test prediction did in fact overpredict or overestimate those values, but the trend line does follow the trend of Sabre stock. Right here we're a little bit off as it dipped pretty low, but overall we did follow the trend line Sabre stock for our test predicted values. So the next piece of our model is we want to build in a forecast model where we don't have data to test on. Now we're going to use all the data to train our model, and we're going to forecast future values that we don't know yet. So these future values are going to include the 33 days since we began the COVID-19 restrictions and the market started to fall. And our goal is, do we have a model that could have predicted the stock market kind of sell-off that we saw during the COVID-19 period over the last 33 trading days? And so here is our actual data over the last 33 days, and then here was our forecasted. And part of the reason the forecasted is so smooth, unlike these rigid changes, is that we use the last 60 days as input to train and predict the next day. But as we move out past our predicted time period, the new predictions become part of those 60-day input lengths, and so we're actually making predictions off of previous days' predictions. And so that smooths our model out, although we do still have nice curvature in the model here. So this slide shows what it looks like for our first large data set, and then here we can see that little curve right there that represents 33 days, and that's our forecast prediction. So here's our forecasted prediction against the actual data, and this represents the large sell-off when COVID-19 hit. And so we can see that even in a deep learning network, there's no way to have foreseen 33 days out that there would have been this deep of a drop off between what was predicted and what dropped off in the stock market, especially for Sabre, which deals with hospitality and travel. One extra column to the data frame that I added, I created a variable called error, and what I did was I took the predicted or our forecasted values and subtracted the actual values, and this is in the Python notebook, and then I give a visual of what that looked like. And so we start off right away. We don't have much error, but after about the first 3 days, when the stock market sell-off starts and our forecast model went flat or stayed within the same ranges, you can see the error jumps dramatically until after about day 20. Now our error is extremely high and our forecast model is not very close. And to reinforce that, I wanted to return a distribution, so a histogram on that error variable that I created, and we can see that there's a large amount of data where the error was very short or less than 2.5 from the actual close price data. But then if we look at to the right of 10, there was a lot of data, and this is towards the end of that forecast cycle of 33 days where the error was really, really large. And so the distribution here is kind of split based on what the stock market did in that sell-off. So to redesign the model, my goal was I don't want to predict future values using such long input lengths because Sabre stock in particular was very volatile. It's up, down. And so what I wanted to do was decrease the length of input, so I made it 45 days, but I wanted to increase the batch size, so more samples of data with less length, so 45 samples of data. And I wanted to give more percent to testing and less to training, so 80-20 split versus a 90-10. I still wanted my 3 LSTM layers with the 2 dropout layers at 0.2. I felt like that was still pretty good, and then obviously our feed forward fully connected layer to the output. Here I used 100 LSTM cells rather than 50. I stuck with the activation function ReLU. Optimizer is still Atom. We still optimize to minimize our mean squared error, but here I use an extra 10 training cycles, giving it 60 epochs. So design and functionality looks the same, but the parameters change. So how our input is going to look with a different length and different number of samples per batch, that's going to change the input sequence. And then how many cells we're using in those LSTM layers, that's going to be a little bit different. And then also the number of training cycles that this whole model will go through, that obviously was up 10, so hopefully we'll get a little bit more reduction in error and loss. So here was our loss model, and we can see that again a steep drop, and then we're kind of up down, but it does level off. And I really like that it looks like if this was a limit problem, this is really leveling off to a stable error loss, whereas 50 it was still up and down. And so I do like adding the extra 10 training cycles or the extra 10 epochs to the model. Here's a brief model summary, and all you're going to see is the change to the input length and then also the number of neurons or LSTM cells for each input, and then also the dropout. So not much change other than you can see the parameters return differently in the model summary. And so here I jumped right to the train test, and I wanted to look at the test versus the actual close prices, and we can see already that much more accurate. It was not overestimated, and the trend was more, I would say, robustly followed by the orange and the blue lines. Why? We're not using input lengths, long input lengths, where we have high volatility to make our prediction on the next day. And so I think shortening that but increasing our samples definitely helped with increased test prediction accuracy. As we move on to the forecast model of the 33 days for the COVID-19 sell-off, obviously here is we have less curvature and it's more flat than the initial model. And part of that is the predicted values become more relevant to that input length quicker than if you had longer input length. So shorter input length becomes a problem when you're forecasting long periods of time. Obviously, it looked better with the test, but worse with the forecast. And so here's a quick look of the 5 years of data and then the 33-day forecast. And obviously, it looks almost like a straight line on this graph that had so much volatility. And in relation to the actual stock price for Sabre over the 33 days where there was a huge sell-off, it looks like a flat line, not much curvature as opposed to the initial model. However, because there was such a steep sell-off, the error looks very similar to the initial model, and the distribution of error looks very similar to the initial model. So not much change in the forecast from the initial model to the redesigned model. The biggest change was observed in the test prediction. So in comparing the results for the two LSTM models for Sabre stock, the similarities, the train test, both models followed trend very closely. So the trend predictions were the same, and then both forecast predictions were smooth, although the redesigned model flattened out a lot quicker than the initial model. The difference is the test accuracy for the redesigned model was much higher than the initial model. That's because the input length was shorter, and so that sort of resolved that volatility problem. But the forecast prediction for the redesigned model was not as accurate and flattened out much quicker than the initial. And so if you're looking to forecast something, you're going to want a longer input length. If you're looking for better test predictions, you might want shorter input length given what the stock has done over the 5 years. Obviously, this was a volatile stock. So in conclusion, the LSTM was a better option than the RNN for long durations. Stock market predictions using the LSTM should not forecast long-term future values, and rather maybe have a model that extracts data daily